Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to look into the Turks' trash units and how bad they really are. Are they truly rubbish, or do they have an unfair reputation? Of course, this is referring to the Turks being the only civilization lacking both pikemen and elite skirmisher. The hussar is obviously not included in this discussion, as while it's a great option for Turks with a free upgrade plus extra pierce armor, it really isn't what people are referring to when they say Turks have weak trash units. So we'll just acknowledge at the start that's an obviously important unit, but not our focus. Now, what makes this an interesting question is that while initially you might think a couple of Feudal Age units would automatically have no utility in Imperial Age, or even maybe Castle Age for that matter, remember they still get blacksmith upgrades, so they do end up objectively quite a bit better than when you see them in early Feudal. Of course, other civilizations are also sometimes lacking blacksmith and other upgrades, and it's not immediately clear how far behind Turk spears and skirmishers are compared to other civilizations. Plus, speaking of upgrades, this is maybe looking a little hard for a silver lining, but remember Turks also require fewer upgrades. That saves hundreds of resources right there, on top of saving the hussar upgrade cost as well. The crux of the question here for Turks though is, do you just need a few more spears against cavalry, or on the other extreme, are they just not cost effective at all? The same question applies to skirmishers, and in both cases, while they may not be the best unit choice, are they at least able to counter the types of units they're intended to at all stages of the game? The way we'll go about determining that is to do some fights with balanced resources. I'm not going to be including upgrade costs here, and we'll just be basing things on the units themselves. We'll then see what percentage of the spearman's HP is left at the end, where 0% means they lost and are not an effective counter with balanced resources. On the other extreme, 100% HP left would be impossibly good and means they took no damage, though really anything above 50% is quite good, and anything under 20% would be considered a soft counter at best. At the same time, to give a baseline for what Turks are missing out on, I'll show how a generic pikeman is doing in the same fight, though the focus is really going to be on whether the spearman is winning or not. We'll start with the spearman in Castle Age. Looking at the pikeman upgrade, Turks are missing out on 10 HP, 1 attack, and a hidden +7 against cavalry, among some other miscellaneous bonus damage improvements. The cost of the upgrade is about 300 resources, which is roughly the total cost of just 5 units. Against another trash unit, the light cavalry, balancing for total resources with full Castle Age upgrades, all around the pikeman ends with about 50% more HP left over at the end of the fight. In both cases though, the spear line is completely fine, and even for Turks, this is a cost-effective exchange. It's a similar story against knights, at least when we balance total resources, spears work as a reasonable counter if they can force the engagement. You can see here they end with almost half their HP left, though obviously pikemen still have a massive advantage. Of course, spearmen are just one of several units that Turks could use to counter knights in Castle Age, and arguably the worst option given their slow movement. Plus, I should note you get a very different result with equal numbers, and it's the spearman's low cost that's making this a good trade. To give the full picture, again, it's a very similar result against camels. The point is, despite being an age behind, you can see these are still cost-effective matchups for spearmen in Castle Age, and as long as you have decent numbers, even without the pikeman upgrade, you can be confident you're getting at least a balanced trade. This is all down to the fact that spearmen have a very nice +15 bonus damage against cavalry, which also happens to ignore armor. Just to make the point clear again though, spearmen do lose one-on-one against all of these units, whereas pikemen are actually able to beat light cavalry and camels with equal numbers. So far though, things are looking at least okay for Turks, but now let's advance to the Imperial Age. With a wave of new technologies, enemy cavalry generally gets better across the board, while Turk spears only receive access to a couple of new blacksmith techs. Compared to even just a generic halberdier, Turks are now missing out on 15 HP, 3 base attack, and most critically, have only about half the halberdier's bonus against cavalry. They would never be your first choice, but are Turk spearmen still even anti-cavalry at this stage? To start off against hussars, your own hussars again are probably the better idea, but if we balance total resources, spearmen actually come out looking okay. They have about a third of their HP left, though of course pikemen and halberdier do much better. Interestingly, at least in this test, the halberdier wasn't that far ahead of the pikemen, as pikemen are already doing quite well in this matchup. Again, this does rely entirely on Turk spearmen having proportionally more units, as one-on-one they lose to a fully upgraded hussar, on top of the hussar's speed advantage. And maybe another surprise result, it's very similar against heavy camels, where Turk spearmen are arguably cost-effective, though again both pikes and halberdiers do very noticeably better, with relatively little distinction between the two. So far, I have to say Turk spearmen are doing pretty well, and the halberdier upgrade looks to be giving very little improvement in the outcome. That's about to radically change though when we take a look at the paladin. The results depend a bit on pathing, but with equal total resources, ignoring any extra value on gold, paladins beat Turk spearmen, and even trade basically even with generic pikemen. The halberdier, on the other hand, completely shreds them. I ran this one a few extra times to get a range of values, and in every case, Turk spearmen were absolutely crushed. This isn't even using a good paladin civ, as here they're just fully upgraded without any extra bonuses. Admittedly, if your opponent in Imperial Age is in a position to make a gold unit and you're not, then that's a bad spot to begin with, and ideally you'd be using heavy camels or gunpowder in this situation. The point though is while Turk spearmen can do a surprisingly decent job against hussars and camels, they run into a bit of a wall against heavy cavalry. Toning things back to the cavalier, in this case Chinese cavalier, it's a bit closer, but again the Turk spearman isn't getting it done, even with a better than 2-to-1 starting numbers advantage, though there's maybe an argument here that it's a decent trade if you highly value gold and are just looking to stall. Likewise, it's a very similar story with battle elephants, where even with a 3-to-1 unit advantage, spearmen just can't cut it. And again, like the paladin, the halberdier upgrade leads to a significantly better outcome. Altogether, it's clear to me from these examples that while spearmen can definitely hold up in Castle Age, and at least do the intended job somewhat against lighter cavalry in Imperial, against heavy cavalry they're just too far behind, despite Imperial Age upgrades and their bonus damage. Especially in Imperial, the camel line is going to be the preferred anti-cavalry unit hands down, if for no other reason than it trades efficiently one-on-one, and can therefore make better use of your population space. But now let's switch and take a look at the Skirmisher, which actually gives some reason for optimism. The elite upgrade in Castle Age gives 5 more HP, 1 more attack, an extra 1 against archers and 3 against cavalry archers, 1 more pierce armor, and maybe most important in some situations, 1 extra range. Compared to the spear, pike, and halberdier trio, we don't see a massive bonus damage increase for the elite skirmisher, which suggests that Turks are maybe not missing out on as much with that upgrade. To start with Castle Age, against crossbows with equal total resources, Turk skirmishers actually hold up just fine. Obviously not as well as elite skirmishers, but it seems feudal counter units can generally perform their counter rolls just fine in a pinch, though the blacksmith upgrades here are helping out. It turns out though they don't do anywhere near as well against cavalry archers, missing out on some pretty important bonus damage, but again they survive, assuming you use their cheaper cost to build up almost double the numbers. But now let's switch to the Imperial Age. Since the Imperial Skirmisher is specific to the Vietnamese, I don't want to confuse the issue by including it here. The fact is, for the vast majority of civilizations, their skirmisher line is only being improved in Imperial Age by blacksmith upgrades in chemistry, implying the gap between the units doesn't increase in the same way as with the spearmen and halberdier, which is cause for a bit of optimism here for Turks. Starting off against fully upgraded arbalesters though, 7 versus 6, the arbalesters consistently beat the Turk skirmishers, while losing handily to elite skirmishers. Of course, these are fully upgraded arbalesters to give a baseline, and if we dig a bit deeper, including some civilizations missing some upgrades and an Ethiopian faster firing arbalester, you can see there's quite a variety of outcomes. A Turk skirmisher, for example, can even beat an Aztec arbalester one-on-one, as it has an armor upgrade that the archer doesn't. Likewise, if we try them head-to-head against a Burmese, Frank, and a generic elite skirmisher, you can see they're basically on the same level as Burmese, who are lacking both the final armor upgrade and thumb ring. It's clear to me that while Turk skirmishers don't hold up against fully upgraded units, the point is, as you start to take away upgrades, they can get pretty close. For another benchmark, heavy cavalry archers actually beat them with equal resources pretty handily, unlike the elite skirmisher. Though on the other hand, against hand cannoneers, Turks do alright, so it is quite dependent on what unit we're talking about. Very consistently though, they're underperforming even generic elite skirmishers by a noticeable amount. So to put it all together, are Turk trash units outside of Hussar completely garbage or still viable? First off, based on what I've seen in Castle Age, there really isn't an issue other than you have better alternatives at the stable against both cavalry and archers. Even generic civs can forgo at least pikemen and still get what they need out of spears. They reliably beat what they're supposed to, at least cost effectively, if you're keeping up with blacksmith techs and utilizing their cheaper cost. In Imperial Age though, things are more situational. Turk spears can be made to look arguably okay against light cavalry units, but fall apart against heavy cavalry. Likewise, while Turk skirmishers can hold up in Castle Age, in Imperial they trade reasonably well against only very weak archers, or some very poor elite skirmishers like Burmese, though it's hard to imagine why you would ever choose the skirmisher over the Hussar in that situation. One final point to keep in mind though is that the Turk skirmisher has the same anti-spear bonus as the elite version, and if you're low on gold, maybe your only response to mass pikes and halberdiers, as desperate as it looks with what appears to be a feudal age unit. So that was a look at the Turks and how their trash units may not be as bad as you thought, or not as good if you're an extremely optimistic person. Big thanks to Yang, Brock, Connor, James, Jean-Paul, Jockster, Kyle, Justin, John, Samantha, Woodruff, and everyone else on Patreon for their amazing support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.